Welcome to Put Simply, the podcast that puts what's happening in the world simply without compromising on the details. Erdem Koch is my name, Rodney McCune and Ozan Ibrisim, as always, my co-hosts. Gents, good to be with you both again.
Good to be with you.
Good to be here.
Well, it's the gift that keeps on giving. I feel like it's a phrase we've been saying a lot for US politics since the election of Donald Trump, but of course I'm referring to all the controversy around Jeffrey Epstein and the files, and are they going to be released? What do they contain? Why doesn't he just release them? There's been a lot of developments over the last week. Of course, this was a major focus of our podcast last week, particularly as we did argue that this is it's a political game that Trump can't really seem to get out of. His base is concerned, some of his base is concerned, some of his base wants to move on, the media doesn't. He wants the media to move on, but they just won't because, of course, new things constantly come up and it's sort of a never-ending saga. And now throw in the lawsuit and the controversial, I guess, relationship with Rupert Murdoch and everything that is happening on that front. Boy, there's a little bit to cover. So, Ozan, kick us off. What has happened between when we spoke last week and this week on this never-ending story?
Well, I guess the main thing that's happened is we've had a number of public opinion polls and other kind of ways to, I guess, understand what political impact this is having on for Donald Trump and the Republicans. So the main thing that's happened is a lot of those. So the polls have come in, and it seems the way he's dealing with this Epstein issue is very, very unpopular, not just amongst the general populace in the US, but most notably and I guess uniquely, it seems that he's very much unpopular with his own Republican base. And that is very new. As I mentioned, it's unique. It's very, very important to highlight that I can't think of any other instance or any other kind of situation that he's been in or controversy where his base has abandoned him. And it seems that his base is very, very unhappy with this situation. You can see it in the way that some of the influencers have stuck to their guns and have demanded the release of the files. You can certainly see the numbers I think it's almost 50-50 when it comes to when you ask the question to Republican voters, how do you feel that the president's way of handling this Epstein issue is? And, it's about even in terms of satisfied and not satisfied. So that is a significant, I think, political issue for him, as I said, the first time. And it really goes to the heart, as we discussed last week, of really, what he was elected to do. Drain the swamp. Get to the bottom of all of this deep state conspiracies and all of this sort of stuff. And it appears that he's lost the trust of the conspiracy theorists within his party. And but it's not just that. It's not just the people who kind of have bought into this conspiracy theory around Jeffrey Epstein being murdered and all of this sort of stuff. He seems to have lost the trust of others who may not have believed the conspiracy stuff, but were very, very I guess interested and wanted to see what all of this was about from the point of view of wanted to see more people getting charged, etc. In summary, he's in deep trouble. I think he's created a situation for himself where, for the first time, he's really unable to shift the narrative, despite trying as hard as he can. He went out and accused Senator Schiff from California of mortgage fraud. He put out an AI-generated video of President Obama getting arrested in the White House, which is just despicable the way that he's put this out, and really unhinged. Whatever he's doing to try and change the narrative, it's not working. The media is pushing it hard. I guess one other significant thing that's happened is the Washington Post, and you touched on this, Adam, released a apologies, the Wall Street Journal released an article that was talking about a letter that Trump had written to Jeffrey Epstein on his 50th birthday, with what was supposed to be a drawing of a nude woman. And in this letter, Trump talks about a whole bunch of secrets that they keep together, and it's amazing that they're so close. And it's basically a love letter that he wrote, very similar to one that he wrote to Kim Jong Un a few years back in his first term. So I think there's now talk of perhaps the administration was trying to kill this story that maybe they knew about from the Wall Street Journal, and hence they came out and made this and get ahead of this story, and by making this announcement and putting out this memo to say that there's nothing to see in this Epstein files, and consequently after that has been published, Trump has announced that he's going to sue Rupert Murdoch. So if you were to tell me that 10 years ago that a Republican president would be suing Rupert Murdoch, I would have said, you've got some serious issues and you've got no idea how politics works. But here we are today.
But I mean, beyond just a Republican suing Rupert Murdoch, I think just any president of the United States suing a media outlet, right? Like this is absolutely unprecedented stuff, and it is quite extraordinary that this is happening in the US, particularly as you mentioned, the relationship that has been somewhat problematic between Trump and Murdoch for quite some time. Although they were very close for a long time, they sort of would publicly embrace, and I think it was in February that Trump hosted Murdoch in the Oval Office, and he had said things like, he's an amazing guy and he's legendary and all those kind of things. But obviously the publication of now we obviously haven't seen the letter. We don't know if it's true or not. But at the end of the day, the Wall Street Journal has reported on this, and Trump is now suing for, I think, around about $10 billion, or it might be $10 billion per each, and then it's like $20 billion or something. It's a big figure, right? And it's obviously unlikely that he would get that level even if he wins. But I mean, for a president that wants this story to go away, he's not exactly making it easy for himself for it to go away, right? I mean, the fact that he is now suing a major press outlet, one of the most influential press people in the world, and now, a massive lawsuit. This is just a story that is going to keep coming back and back and haunting him over and over again. I'm curious how he gets, I don't want to say out of this. I don't know if that's the right word. I'm curious how this actually gets resolved. I mean, politically speaking, this is not good for him. He wants the press to stop talking about it. There are developments every other day. There is now a serious lawsuit between him and Rupert Murdoch, or he's suing Rupert Murdoch and the Wall Street Journal. I mean, this just doesn't seem to go away anytime soon, and it becomes a bigger and bigger problem for him. Rodney, how are you sort of seeing the developments, both from everything that's happened over the last week, the suing of Murdoch and the Wall Street Journal, and I guess the next chapter, if we can even look ahead to there?
Yeah, I think in terms of Murdoch, they get on a hook for themselves, really, because they pleaded with him not to run the story, and then threatened him when he said he would run the story, and then are on the hook of having threatened them that they were going to issue proceedings. They went through with it, which of course gives greater legs to the story. So he's on that difficult position that people do find themselves in from time to time when there's negative press coverage, but they have to decide, am I going to issue a denial? Am I going to issue a denial plus take action? Or am I just going to choose to ignore it? He clearly felt he couldn't ignore it. He doesn't want the story to continue, but he's actually fueled the next cycle of it himself. And of course, it's going to become a further story when these proceedings are inevitably discontinued or done away with. I don't know whether there's some tactic involved in it, in terms of, because of the fact of the legal action, that in some way that limits what they can disclose. But I can't see that there's a line up there. In the same way that used the Maxwell appeal as an argument why certain grand jury documents might not be able to be unsealed because the final conclusion of the process wasn't there. But I mean, what people are really asking for aren't grand jury documents, not testimony. They're not. I mean, yes, maybe that has some residual interest. What they really want to know is intel, actual evidence, raw evidence, from which they can draw their own conclusions. And it's a fear of conclusions that can be drawn from the set of facts that are available that are probably causing greatest concern. And that's names being mentioned in certain places. The fact of attendance at his home or on his plane or anything else that people would go, okay, well, if that's happened, then something more must have happened and they must be implicated in this whole thing. But as you said at the start, Ozan, I mean, it's an issue that the Republicans have created for themselves, or certainly MAGA have created for themselves, because they've talked about this great sex trafficking conspiracy at the top of government that's been there protected by the deep state and all these other things. So once they're on that hook, it's really difficult to get off it again. They should either just share everything and explain what might cause questions, or they're going to be on this cycle until it happens. I don't think they can do anything other than go transparency, because it's not going away, I don't think.
Ozan, I'm curious from your perspective, and I'm going to ask you to be as objective as you possibly can here. As someone who has briefed politicians, both in your time in active politics, as someone who continues to work in an advisory role through your work with Oroka Group, if you were advising the Trump camp today, politically speaking, to get out of this mess, I mean, where would you start? What is the advice that would come in externally? And I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but just off the top of your head, like, where would you actually start doing this?
Ooh. So you're asking all the hard questions. Look, first and foremost, they need they need to come up with a process to come up with some answers. And I think it's not helping right now that the Democrats are putting significant political pressure on by trying to force a vote in the House to compel the DOJ to release the documents, and also to start an investigation where then they can subpoena people, etc. And the House Speaker Mike Johnson is refusing to hold that vote. And in fact, I believe yesterday in the House of Representatives, the Republicans walked out and refused to have the vote. I mean, everything they're doing right now is exactly what they shouldn't be doing. First of all, I would, I mean, why did you put out that memo? And if there are things in there that are going to hurt Trump, to think that could just, after everything that this Epstein issue has become for the MAGA movement, to think that you could put out a memo and say, hey guys, there's nothing to see here, is absolutely, bizarre and crazy, if you ask me. So, once you've done that, you've opened up a can of worms. And at the end of the day, they have to have a process, and he needs to try and control the narrative about that process. He needs to say, look, I've asked someone to look at it, and I've asked another review of these, etc. He's made some comments. He's tried to go down that path by saying, I trust the Attorney General Pam Bondi's judgment. She will release what's appropriate, etc. But that he needs to empower the Congress or someone to have some sort of I think it was a special counsel or something that was being flagged, whatever it is of that thing. But yeah, he needs to create something where they can go through a process. And if you're going to constantly have conversations about it, and if this is going to dominate the media agenda, then at least you want to do it through a process and have it a bit more structured than what he's doing now, which is basically trying to deflect and trying to do everything he can to kind of get people off the topic, which clearly is not working, and it's resulting in him continuously, bleeding politically. And at this point in time, unless something changes, he's not going to be the presidential candidate in 2028. But we have an election in 2026, and the more a lot of those Republican Congress members, aren't able to show that they care about this issue and vote for it to be released, etc. They can't go on record if a vote's not being held. The more they're kind of perceived as helping to cover something up, the more that's going to politically hurt them. So he needs to gain control of the politics of this issue. But I honestly don't think he's capable of it. I think he's until now he has been a master at changing the story and getting control and monopolizing media coverage. But this issue, strikes so closely to the base, and this is not an issue he can get out of that easily. So he needs to put a process in place and buy some time.
Yeah, well said. So I always thought you had it in you to be an advisor to President Trump, mate. I think we're definitely going down that path.
It was very difficult to answer that question, my friend.
Well, let's talk about, I mean, have there been any positives? We've seen some trade deals along the way. We've seen sort of, I guess, other issues come up over the last week that we've seen. Rodney, are there any positives to the Trump presidency as they continue to navigate this very bizarre year?
Yeah, they're giving people like us something to talk about. But yeah, apart from that, I don't see where the great successes are. Cost of living is still a problem. All the problems that they had at the outset, they haven't resolved. And all the things they said they wouldn't do, they're starting to do. And the things that they said they would do, they're not doing. So, that's pretty for mid 6 months in mid-year card. It's in a very odd presidency. I'm going to say it's a very odd presidency. The trade deals aren't trade deals either. We've got to be clear on that. The tariffs aren't being imposed. It's just chaos. There's no direction with any of this stuff. It's just chaos.
And I think, again, I'm not sure if this was an actual trade deal that was ready to be announced. But overnight, the Japan trade deal, what he labels as a massive trade deal, was announced. So I don't know whether that's to deflect away from the Epstein thing. I suspect it probably is, or they were ready to announce, and both parties decided that the timing was good. But again, that's a trade deal that means that the US imposes 15% tariffs on
Yes,
Japanese goods.
but that's the point, right? It's just an announcement.
Exactly.
There's no substance,
Yeah.
and the announcement's there to get. Well, Japan's got a difficulty because of its own elections, but it's there to get Trump a separate news coverage and off the hook that if he doesn't say there's a deal, he actually has to follow through with the tariffs that he threatened. So these are all paper thin. It's like the UK trade deal. It was basically right. We've agreed a deal, subject to all the stuff that we have to agree that makes up the trade deal. It's headlines.
This one's actually quite damaging to him politically, if you ask me. But this trade deal that he's able to negotiate includes a reduction in tariffs to be imposed on Japanese-made cars. So you've already seen the top three manufacturers of cars in automobiles in the US come out saying this is a disaster for US car manufacturing. So it's very anti-America first. It's this is not what people signed on for. Tariffs were supposed to protect the actual local manufacturing industry, but this tariff deal with Japan, and let's face it, Japan is a major automotive. This is a global automotive giant in terms of a country. It's going to hurt the America First agenda. So he's not only making these, kind of deals that aren't deals, but also the stuff that he's flagging in there is hurting the MAGA agenda. So
So
it's
what? Yeah,
truly bizarre.
but Ozan, what's going to happen now is he'll flip, right? There'll be negative media coverage. He'll panic, or someone will panic. He'll blame someone else. He'll say he didn't see it. He'll
Yeah.
just say, right, that bit's now removed. So the point is, none of the deals have any permanence. They have they last as long as there's no enforcement mechanism really. They just last as long as they do until he changes his mind 2 days later. It's the
Yeah.
same as the tariff stuff. It's just chaos.
It is.
Chaos is my word for today.
Yeah. No, it seems to be a very good way to describe what's going on. I think you asked the question, Adam, is there any positive stuff? Of course it is. If you're Trump, there's a lot of positive stuff going on. But for the first time, nobody's buying it. Nobody's moving on from the Epstein agenda. And in what was supposed to be a positive thing with Japan and also Philippines, I believe he's come to some sort of agreement on the terms of a trade deal. Um, you know, even though something's supposed to be positive, it's actually quite negative when you look into the detail of it, because it's not what people signed up for. So yeah, he's not dealing with things all that well.
Yeah, I think that's just it's becoming a bit of a common theme, and it was a bit of a theme during his first presidency as well. And it's the level of chaos and borrow Rodney's favorite word today, and the level of on again, off again sort of approaches to things, which is proving to be problematic. I mean, just have a look at the first 6 months of the year and the multiple things that have happened, and international wars and economic downturns, and the dropping of the value of the US dollar, the on again, off again tariffs. I mean, it is just that level of frustration amongst people who need certainty and businesses who need certainty and want certainty. And, there's only so much the America First rhetoric gets you before people start looking at numbers and the fact that the numbers aren't adding up to the extent that I guess they necessarily wanted to. But speaking of numbers and counting and things adding up, one election that happened over the weekend was, of course, in Japan. Ozan, take us through the results of the Japanese election.
Yeah, it was an election that was held for the upper house of the Japanese Parliament, and it was always going to be a quite tough one for the Prime Minister and the ruling party. But out of the 124 seats that were contested, two-thirds of them went to opposition parties. So not a great outcome. But what's notable and interesting is one of the main parties, opposition parties that were able to gain quite a bit of success is one called Sanseito, and it's effectively a populist party. They are running on a platform of Japanese first. Some of their taglines are things like, make Japan great again, which doesn't sound as good as MAGA, obviously, but it's kind of working, and it's led by a gentleman by the name of Sohei Kamiya, who apparently was a supermarket manager and English teacher, and decided through YouTube that he was going to start a party, a political party during the pandemic, and very similar to some of those populist and far right kind of groupings in the US. The major kind of way that he was, able to gain support was spreading, conspiracy theories, criticizing the global elite, all of these sorts of stuff. So yeah, it seems that you know, not it's not well, it's surprising that he's able to kind of get so much success and increase from 1 to 14 seats in the upper house. But it's also not very surprising that something like a Japanese first kind of campaign is gaining traction in a place like Japan, who really has had a pretty tough time over the last few years. In fact, over the last probably decade or two, with their economy, their aging population, obviously, their currency has depreciated significantly. So people in Japan are, I think, feeling the economic pressures, like many people are around the world, and they've found, a new party to get behind, and they're looking at this party for solutions. But I think, like many of these types of populist parties, it's very easy to throw these sorts of things around and get people angry and talk about the problems all the time. But I'd be interested to see what type of solutions that this Japanese First Party has.
Yeah, I mean, it's just going to be interesting to see what the transition in government is. I know that initially the Prime Minister said he was going to stay because there was important tariff deadline of the 1st of August. But now, if there is a form of a deal, that removes that, and the rumours are now that he'll go next month after seeing sort of the next few weeks out of the way and try and organise whatever the transition happens to be, not just in terms of actually who's going to be running things, but also within his own party, etc. So it's uncertain times for Japan, but certainly interesting times. And remember, he's not been in the job that long either. So the thing is, you don't associate Japan and a lot of these countries that have had strong economic performance over many years with unstable politics. We've had the chaos, again, I'm going to use that, of what's been happening in South Korea over the past number of months, where it's been some pretty crazy stuff with the martial law and the 24-hour thing and whatever. And now we seem to be having something similar happening in Japan, where we have increased level of political instability. So it's certainly an interesting time for Japan watchers. And a good friend of mine is gone there as the bureau chief for the Wall Street Journal. Took up post about 2 weeks ago, and I'm sure he's going to be having interesting time reporting on Japanese politics over the coming weeks.
What I find fascinating is that you kind of the whole MAGA movement has created a political environment where it's now it's very binary. I mean, if you're America first, America has to win and everyone else has to lose, and that's kind of the mentality that they've created. So I find it very odd that in these countries like Japan, there are movements like this that are taking their inspiration from a movement in the US that's all about making sure that everyone else loses and America wins. And they're trying to kind of, import that in. It's kind of quite actually counterintuitive, because for Japanese first, you would assume that, you need to be kind of trying to punish the US and others. And in a country like Japan, you can, because obviously Japan has a very strong kind of trade, and is able to throw its weight around quite a bit in the global economy. So yeah, it's very bizarre that everyone's going, oh yeah, let's create a Japan first thing based on America first, but then sit back and have a scenario where Japan is going to be significantly disadvantaged from such a deal. So it's odd. I mean, they're very supportive of what Trump's doing, but what Trump's doing is going to certainly not put Japan first.
Yeah, an interesting time ahead for that country, and something we'll definitely keep our eyes on. Speaking of interesting things, one of the debates that's happening in the UK at the moment is the voting age and whether it should be lowered from 18 down to 16. Rodney, where on earth did this come from?
It's featured in the Scottish referendum, I think, initially in the UK, where there was some sort of, regional vote And that's when it first came up as a bit of a topic. And Labour have certainly um, trying to move it forward now to become a national policy for elections. And obviously, there's of usual debates where you have the right worried about, I'm going to say centre right, worried about young people having to vote because they believe they're too left, and the left wanting to be seen as progressive and moving things on, and therefore they're embracing this. But there's also a discussion around who might be the actual beneficiaries of this, and could it be, with an increase in young men willing to vote, the sort of new right reform type Trumpian grouping within the UK. So it's certainly interesting that Labour have proposed this, and of course it's uh, it's going to be, I suspect, carried through, and it'll be a feature of future elections. It's not completely without precedent. There are other countries in predominantly in South America who do have a voting age of 16, but obviously there's a pretty much a sliding scale right up to countries where you still have to be in your 20s or to be able to vote. But yeah, I mean, from my perspective, why not? I don't see why a 16 or 17-year old who is able to work and contribute to the tax base shouldn't have a say in how that money's spent, or how the future direction of the country should be, or what it should be, any more than someone because they've lived longer, you know, drawing on whatever experiences they have. Some of the let's say regions of the UK also have had 16-year-old voting, but these are sort of the protectorate type islands, Guernsey, Guernsey, I think maybe even the Isle of Man. So they're not even then unusual features of the UK system, but it's never been on a national basis. So yeah, roll on. It'll give politicians more challenges of how to engage with a younger population. It might also bring more young candidates into the slate for political parties as well. So yeah, I'm pretty positive about it. I think it's a good thing. More people who want to have a say being allowed to have a say, the better.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think I completely agree. The more you can, enfranchise young people to be involved in the political process, the better, particularly in a place where voting is not compulsory. I think, I think it makes a lot of sense, because obviously the more people who are interested, the more people who are voting, is better for obviously a healthier economy. And I think they should be. The more people we can get to vote at that age, I think is good. I'm not sure when I think about myself at the age of 16. Many of the decisions I made probably weren't all that great. So I'm not sure I would have entrusted myself with making the right decision. But that's what politics is all about. At least you get involved and you get engaged, and you might make a decision at the age of 16, which might be very different to the one you make at 35. It wasn't in my case, but I guess that's the theory.
Yeah, and just on the Scottish point, it was 2014 at the referendum on independence that 16-year-olds were first allowed to vote in Scotland, and it has been a feature of Scottish regional elections since then. So it's really extending that wider. So it's not a huge revolution, and people have a good understanding of the impact that there has been on voting patterns as a result of that, before making this change.
I mean, a lot of it also has to do with, I think there are probably many 16-year-olds who are probably more engaged and informed about what's going on than, 30-year-olds or 40-year-olds. So I think there's a broader question here that, we're not encouraging people to be engaged with the political process. And, I think it makes a lot of sense to have younger people voting, but at the same time, governments really through the education system and various other places, we need to get people to kind of be more engaged. And it's a little bit difficult sometimes when you think about, okay, I'm very interested in politics. A lot of people around me are very interested in politics, etc. But most people aren't, and they really should be, because we see what happens when people aren't engaged or involved in the democratic process. We have pretty suboptimal outcomes sometimes.
Indeed, let's see where that lands as well. Gents, wonderful speaking to you both this week. We're going to take a couple of weeks off now to, I guess, allow for the Northern Hemisphere summer to be somewhat enjoyed by certain people on this call, and a little bit of travel, and of course, to make use of this slowing news cycle. But of course, if there's an emergency, we'll come back and do an emergency podcast here on Put Simply. But otherwise, I look forward to chatting to you both again in a couple of weeks' time.
Cheers, mate. Enjoy your European summer.
It's raining in London, so don't get too excited if you're coming this far.
Well, safe travels to you as well, Rodney. Take care, gents. Speak to you soon.
Thank you.